All right,
Crazy.
well, I'll get you going. I don't want to take up all
Okay.
your time here,
Yeah.
but Mike Griffith, of course, Atlanta Journal-Constitution's Dog Nation here.
Yeah, man.
Here for Wednesday. You're here all the days,
all
but
week. Yeah.
Wednesday's a big day, of course, for you with
Sure.
Kirby and the contingent there from Athens. So, did you learn anything new from what you heard today?
Not really. I mean, Kirby's hungry. I mean, and a lot of times teams take on the personality of their head coach, and you could tell how motivated he was. Making sure, hey, complacency is not going to be the issue. The issue is going to be inexperience, and but that's a challenge. I mean, let's not take that lightly. I mean, yes, there is a lot of talent, but as Tebow said earlier this week, it's easier to replace talent than leadership. And the fact of the matter is, there were 18 different guys that were game captains last year, and only 4 of those guys are back. You lost 15 guys in the NFL draft, 5 first-round picks. You lost 13 guys to the portal, 4 of them former starters. I mean, that's a lot of attrition. Kirby lost 4 out of his 9, 10 assistant coaches. So a lot of attrition, a lot of newness. There's obviously a model in place, a template in place for success. But until you go out there and do it, it's challenging. In the schedule, while I think it's a little light in the SEC on the front end, I think that Oregon game, it's tough. And even if you beat Oregon, other teams are going to have the opportunity to see how Dan Lanning, who knows your personnel better than anyone, chooses to defend you. So a blueprint of sorts that other teams can build off of.
Any surprise that Kirby mentioned, the Stetson Bennett and the rankings and everything? It's almost like everyone's going to pick him to win the East and come back to Atlanta to face probably Alabama. But it's almost like he's picking at those minor cracks in the armor there.
Well, yeah, I mean, Kirby wants to maintain that underdog role. You heard him say today, we're not going to be the hunted. We're going to be the hunters. And the way to stay the hunter is to maintain a chip on your shoulder.
Yeah.
So you look for headlines like that. And if you want to serve it up to Kirby Smart that Stetson Bennett isn't one of the 5, well, let's be honest. He's not one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL. In terms of NFL value, in terms of if they went to the combine, but he doesn't have to be.
Right.
He doesn't have to. He does what he's asked to do. He's efficient. The efficiency numbers are off the charts. How are you going to defend 3-4 tight end sets with the talent they have there? Speed on the perimeter. I like the running backs even better. And Stetson he's going to be 25 years old in October. I mean, this is a grown man. So and when he's not on the top 5, like people say, well, I'm sorry, but this is a really good year for quarterbacks in the SEC. Listen, Will Rogers, some people say, isn't in the top 5. KJ Jefferson, some people say. So I think you're splitting hairs, or people are splitting hairs if they want to get bent out of shape about that. I mean, the reality of it is Stetson has never started the season as the starting quarterback, and the other reality is he didn't have any other scholarship offers from any other teams. But instead of complaining about that, to me, I look at it that makes his story so much more special and unique that in spite of and in lieu of, and maybe he isn't the biggest, but you know what? He scrambles, he makes plays, he's clutch when he needs to be. That's good enough if you've got a good defense and a good supporting cast. And Stetson's not back there to be Cam Newton and carry a team on his shoulders.
Right.
He's back there to distribute the ball in a very complex NFL-style offense. And some people may not value that, but Georgia fans, who cares what other people? Every SEC team thinks their guy's the best.
Yeah.
And so, but Kirby is picking on that because he wants to keep Georgia in that underdog role.
Right.
It's a lot easier when the expectations are a little bit lower coming in than when everybody's saying, oh, we expect you to win, right? So Kirby's going to grasp that. He's going to use that for motivation. And you're going to hear that all year long.
It's tough to play underdog when you're hanging banners.
Great point, Shane. I mean, that's right. But that's what's interesting. That is where Georgia's at.
Right.
And part of the reason why is because I didn't think Georgia got nearly the amount of credit that they deserve going in. The USA Today last year didn't have any guys on first team on offense or defense from Georgia before the season. I mean, Jake Camarda was the only first teamer. The number 1 overall draft pick, Trayvon Walker, was a third-team pick here last year. 2 of those first-rounders, Devontae Wyatt and Quay Walker, they weren't first, second, or third team.
Right.
So this Georgia team, I don't want to say that they didn't have any credit going into last year, but Alabama was the pick, and Alabama was the talk. And Georgia really didn't become the story until the second half of last season, I didn't feel like.
Not only that, but Clemson was favored to beat him in the opener, if memory serves. So
fantastic football game. And let's not, that game kind of people downplay. If Georgia doesn't beat Clemson, they don't get a second chance to play Georgia, to play Alabama.
Now, I don't know if you've heard this, but there are not a lot of people picking it, but I believe someone on Feinbaum went on and said Tennessee picked to win at Georgia, and we got some Georgia fans riled up on that. I know that's a program you know well. You covered them as well. What are the odds that actually happens, even though I know that's late in the year?
Well, preseason odds and game odds are, right now Georgia's favored by double digits over everyone on their schedule right now.
Right.
But does Stetson stay healthy? Does Brock Bowers stay healthy? Does Jalen Carter stay healthy? Does Jamon Dumas-Johnson, the Mike linebacker? Does Christopher Smith? You've got 5 or 6 guys there that you really can't afford to lose, in my opinion. And again, I say can't afford to lose, but we're talking about championship standards. I mean, Georgia could lose 5 or 6 guys and still win 11 or 12 games. But that's not where the program's at now. We're measuring Georgia as a national champion. These are guys you can't afford to lose if you want to win another national championship. Right. So I'll put that into perspective. I heard Takeo Spike pick South Carolina to beat Georgia in Columbia the 3rd week of the season. Tennessee coming into Sanford State. We've seen it before, Michael. We saw it with Butch Jones and Josh Dobbs' Hail Mary to Juwan Jennings at Kirby's first year in 2016. So it's not unprecedented. We saw an unranked South Carolina team coached by Will Muschamp in 2019 knock off a top 5 Georgia team. So Georgia, prior to last year, had kind of had a history of a regular season stumble, whether it was Auburn in 2017 or 2018 LSU, although it turned out Joe Burrow wasn't too bad of a quarterback. 2019, the South Carolina game. 2020, the loss to Florida, albeit without Jordan Davis and Richard LeCounte after their injuries. So could this be a year where Georgia loses an SEC game? I predicted that they would. Now I don't have one team circled. But I think you look at Oregon, you look at Tennessee, you look at Kentucky, you look at South Carolina, you look at Mississippi State and Kentucky on the road in particular, and you say, could the Dogs have an off day and lose one regular season? I think they could. Now, that would still put them in the SEC championship game,
Right.
And I think they'll be there, and I think Alabama will be there, and we'll have to see what Bama's got going on because, hey, if they lose Bryce Young, what's Alabama? If they lose Will Anderson, what's Alabama? So this conference is fluid, and it's so close. It's so close that losing 1 or 2 guys just changes everything. Florida should have beat Alabama in the opener.
Right.
Mm-hmm. If Dan Mullen beats Nick Saban in Gainesville on a 2-point conversion, we're having a completely different conversation today.
And that all came down to a missed point at PAT. That's why they had to go for 2.
So there we go. So a coach gets fired, and Alabama ends up back in a national title game. Gators win that game. Bama's not the West champ.
Hey, well, speaking of Florida, I caught you on SEC Network this morning, giving a little ribbon there to old Billy Napier.
Wow.
Not a ton of respect for what he's accomplished there at Louisiana.
Relative to Brian Kelly, which was the context of the question, was, these guys are going to be married at the hip. Who's the better hire? I said, well, you got a guy that's been at Louisiana 4 years, and you got Notre Dame's all-time winningest coach. Let me think about this. Okay. And I've got a lot of respect for Brian Kelly. I spent 4 years back in the Big Ten covering Michigan State from 2012 to 16. And what Brian Kelly is legendary in Michigan for what he did at Grand Valley State. A lot of people are going, what the hell's a Grand Valley State? It's in Grand Rapids. It was a 1AA school. He was a dynamo. And what he did there led him to Cincinnati, and what he did at Cincinnati was unprecedented. He brought Cincinnati into the BCS formula, and then he goes to I skipped over Central Michigan. He was outstanding there as well. So this is a guy that's won every place he's been. Now SEC's different, but he's at LSU, and we know there's resources, we know there's talent. How quickly can he put it? And I kind of feel like in today's day and age, it's not what have you done for me lately, it's what are you going to do for me next. Fan bases aren't real patient, and particularly at traditional powerhouses like LSU and Florida. People are going to be really quick to try to write off an outsider like Brian Kelly or to write off a young gun like Billy Napier. Do these programs, are they really going to have the patience to go 4 years with these guys if neither one wins their half of the division? Probably not. So it's almost like a track meet, and who can get out the fastest and get that momentum. And that's where I favor Brian Kelly over Florida because the SEC East, while not as dynamic as it's ever been, it's deep. It's better. Kentucky and Tennessee, I'm not going to say they will beat Florida, but they should beat Florida.
Right.
Okay, based on what they have coming back. South Carolina, a little bit of a wild card with Spencer Rattler, but I think we all like Shane Beamer. Yeah. I think everybody likes to feel good, and can that style win? Do they have something special going? I don't know. Or is it a 2-6 team? I'm not sure. But I think it's going to be tough for the Gators to be over 500, whereas I think LSU has enough talent that they can be a 5-3 team in the league.
Yeah, I was looking for Kirby's hype dance this morning. I didn't get it on Twitter like Beamer.
Wasn't that something else? You know what? I give him credit.
Yeah.
And Look, guys, I mean, I've seen what Michael's done. You know, Michael Bratton here has done such a tremendous job over the years. Michael, you'd admit, it's about finding your niche, man.
Yeah.
I think you found it. I think, you know, what you're doing is incredible. I think Sam Pittman fills a niche.
Yeah.
You know, I think Shane Beamer fills a niche. Everybody's got to kind of find their role and their identity and what they do. And I feel like Shane Beamer's found something here. There's going to be a certain type of player that's going to appeal to. And we know South Carolina has the ceiling because Beamer pointed out in Destin that, 2010, his last year with Spurrier. I mean, this is hard to believe. This happened. South Carolina beat Clemson, Florida, and Tennessee in the same year.
Yeah.
That's not – it's not like it's unprecedented.
Right.
It can be done. They've got great facilities there. Obviously, Clemson, you know, it toppled them and dominated the state for a while. We're kind of wondering about Clemson. Clemson's a little staggered right now. They lost both their coordinators. Still, it's number 2 defense in the country last year. But you just wonder if DJU or the other quarterback works out. Could this be a time when South Carolina, as they did with Spurrier, kind of takes back? And again, it's way too early to tell, but the possibilities are there. And getting back to the original point, Shane Beamer has found his niche in the SEC.
Yeah.
So you seem so high on the Gamecocks. Who do you got second in the East? Is it South Carolina this year?
No, I'm high on what they're doing. I'm not convinced that it's going to be enough. You know, I think it's Tennessee and Kentucky probably both go 5-3. I think Gators in South Carolina, one's 3-4, or excuse me, one's 3-5, one's 2-6, depending on who you think's going to win that football game. And in Vanderbilt, Missouri, I just write. I mean, Vanderbilt's just terrible. They don't care. They don't invest in their facilities. It's a facade. It's sad. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that somebody doesn't call Vanderbilt on the carpet and say, look, you need to start showing up, man. You need to give your kids better facilities. You need to put some of this money we're paying you. You got to put it into your stadium. You're an embarrassment to the league. You're everybody's favorite road trip. Show some pride.
Right.
Do your student athletes in football better. We know you can do it. You've won in other sports. I mean, we're not asking you to be your bowling national team, but look what you've done with baseball, basketball occasionally good. Football, and we've seen Derek Mason did it good. James said, we know it can be done. Jordan Rogers right down there. Jay Cutler. I mean, they've had some dudes.
Yeah, they have.
It can be done, and Nashville is a fantastic city that deserves so much more. They build a new stadium, and somehow Vanderbilt's not involved. That's worse than the road situation in Murfreesboro and South Nashville. Just poor planning. Do better, Nashville. Do better, Vanderbilt. So and I'll tell you how I really feel on the next show. And now Missouri had a chance to get JT Daniels and couldn't close the deal. If they get JT Daniels, we're sitting here talking about Missouri.
Yeah.
Because they got some talent, right?
Absolutely.
And they probably would have got some other guys out of the portal. But they couldn't close the deal on JT, so he's at West Virginia, and Eli Drinkwitz is up here talking about tennis shoes and probably getting fired in 2 years. So I write off Vanderbilt and Missouri just right off the top of the bat. But those other 4 schools, you know, to your point, I think they're all potential contenders.
Last thing for you, Mike. Is there anything to, Georgia for so many years, and Kirby, you could throw him in there, could not get over Alabama? Now, of course, they did it in the only game that really mattered last season. We've seen it in the past. Clemson, once they've been able to beat Bama, they've done it consecutively. Ole Miss, same deal. It's almost like a psychological thing where you can't envision it till you actually do it. Georgia's done it. Everybody. Well, not everybody, but probably 99% is going to be picking Alabama to win the SEC. Is there anything to that, you think, Mike, that Georgia's done it, they believe they can do it, they know they can do it, and they actually get it done by the end of the season?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. And to your point, it involves buy-in, right? When the players believe that their coaches can put them in a position to win. And, you heard a lot of, Georgia players saying, the first time we played Bama in the SEC title game, we tried to do X, Y, Z and all this extra stuff. The second time we just simplified it and it worked. Well, it's a little bit easier to simplify when John Mechie's not out there and Jameson Williams gets hurt in the second quarter. So how much of it was scheme? How much it was a personnel? Ajay Hall drops a pass inside the 5-yard line. Conversely, Stetson fumbles back a point, touchdown to them inside his 20. I mean, it's a game of mistakes. But to your point and the psychology of it, I don't ever really feel like Georgia didn't feel like they could beat I mean, they had Alabama beat in 2017.
Right.
If the safety doesn't bite on Tua's look-off, Georgia's your national champion in 2017. They were the better program. They won the SEC. Alabama backed into the college football playoff.
Right.
That wouldn't happen today. And I'm not saying it was right or wrong. I do think Bama was one of the 4 best in 2017. But the system's flawed when they get a bye and they don't have to play in the SEC championship game.
Yeah.
And Georgia beats the team that beat Alabama by 10 points, 28-7, right? And none of that matters. In fact, Bama had an easier matchup against Clemson in New Orleans. Georgia gets shipped out to the West Coast against the best Oklahoma team that they've had out there the 21st century. So that was a rocky road. So I think Georgia was better in 2017. I think Georgia could have, should have, maybe would have won 2018 if not for a key injury to an outside linebacker and Jalen Hurts coming off the bench with an incredible, legendary performance in the fourth quarter of that game. Those teams, Georgia and Alabama, were neck and neck in 17-18.
Yeah.
So I don't know that so much was a psychological hurdle. I think the Georgia players felt they could win. 2020, they're beating Alabama at halftime with the mailman, with a four-string walk-on quarterbacks winning in Tuscaloosa at halftime. Before everything comes unwound in the second quarter and Sark makes some adjustments and, they lights him up in the 2020 in the second half of that game. 2021, you saw two different games, right? You saw Alabama in the first game and once again those receivers were able to get loose and make some dynamic things happen. And Georgia had played some pretty poor competition the previous two games and Georgia Tech and not Coastal Carolina. It was one of those Charleston, I believe it was Charleston. So it had been a minute since Georgia had played with a sense of urgency, and they even said they fell out of shape.
Yeah.
And then Georgia hits the reset and dominates Michigan. Michigan fans don't talk about that. By the way, I got to throw this out. Did you guys see John Harbaugh when he said that the two teams that there's two teams that stand out to prepare the guys the best for and he said Michigan and Alabama. I said Michigan. Did you miss the game? And I went back and looked. I said, well, my gosh, the Ravens were in the middle of a 6-game losing streak. He might have really missed that game. And he calls Jim Harbaugh, and he said, what John Harbaugh said was there's two teams that are at the top of my mind when I think about programs that prepare the best. They're most like NFL teams. So maybe he calls Jim and says, Jim, I missed the game. How did you do against Georgia in the Orange Bowl? And Jim says, we lost, but we're more like an NFL team that can prepare. All right, I'll keep that at the top of my mind. And so maybe that's where that quote came from. Or maybe it's just that, John Harbaugh is shilling for his brother. And it's hard to fault him, but in this day and age, and you can't say that stupid stuff.
Right.
Okay? This is the SEC. Georgia's a big-time program. You're not going to get away with saying stupid stuff. I don't care who you are, especially if you haven't been in the playoffs in 6 years or haven't won a playoff game in 6 years.
Right.
All right, Mike, on your way out, can you tell the audience where to find you?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Michael. Mike Griffith 32 on Twitter. I post a lot of my stories and social media stuff there on Twitter. I'm on Instagram as well. I think that's a much easier find, although a lot of my pictures, like birds and beaches and things like that. You're like, what is this guy doing? Hey, we got a life too. And
is this the right guy?
Yeah, right. And DogNation.com. So
absolutely, thank you so much. This is fantastic.
Thank you so much.